Hey, deserving listeners, new season of 90 Day Fiancé, and I'm really looking forward to this because the last season I didn't really have much to say. I mean, it was, I guess, kind of interesting, but it didn't really lend itself to the content on this YouTube channel. So I think these couples often do provide a lot of jumping off points that we can get into. So I'm looking forward to that. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. As I always say, don't use YouTube as a replacement for therapy. If you need a therapist, get one. You deserve it. Let's watch.
Yeah, to marry Sumit.
Jenny!
Oh my God! There you are.
Unfortunately, we didn't get married that time because I found out that Sumit had a secret.
I didn't tell Jenny that I'm married.
Yeah, it's interesting. So they're reviewing everything that happened, and I think this is spanning 10 years, maybe 10 plus years. And they're talking about how he catfished her at first, how he had pictures of an actor in England, I believe, and was communicating with Jenny, possibly with other people. I'm just going to take a guess and say that he was catfishing others, maybe countless others, who knows? Maybe it was only Jenny, who knows? And Jenny liked him and communicated, and then at some point he felt bad, Sumit, so he came clean and said, no, I'm actually this other guy. And Jenny still liked him, and so she flew out. But I guess I want to highlight, because they're gonna summarize his shadiness and his lying. And I think that after the last season, there were some incidents where I thought, I think this is a pattern. Because in the beginning, I thought, well, you know, maybe it was a one-off thing where he catfished her. And then, well, you know, him being married and not telling her, when you really understand the circumstances of his marriage, you understand, well, that's a tough position to be in. But then when you really start to see the pattern and the way he reacts to things, the way that he justifies it, his avoidance of reality, the pathological nature of it. You know, when we use the term pathological lying in my field, what we're typically referring to is someone who does it without reason, really, and without consciously recognizing the consequences. For example, if you were late to work and you lie to your boss, and you have that feeling inside of you of like, oh, I'm gonna lie to my boss. Oh, well, I had a flat tire. Or, oh, well, my cat got really sick even though you just slept in, or you drank too much last night, or I don't know, whatever, just some other reason. And you're lying, but you feel it and you know it, and you're worried about the consequences. You think, ooh, if my boss finds out, like, this could be bad for me. And you actually might not even lie because of worries of the consequences. Now, I want to say that in most circumstances, we should not be lying. I think there's a normalization of that. You'll often hear me, old man, shake fist at modern culture and say that we shouldn't be normalizing even those kinds of lies. You know, best case scenario, you can actually come clean to your boss and say, you know what, I drank too much last night and I slept in, and I'm really sorry. I'm going to work on that, and I hope you understand. You know, I think most people, you know, bosses will say, you know, I've been there before. Thanks. You know, they might even say, wow, I mean, most people would just lie to me. So that makes me trust you even more the next time, that if you actually say it legitimately was my cat this time, then it lends credibility if you actually can come clean. And if you have a boss that is super unreasonable, maybe a little lie is justified, I don't know. But if you have a boss that is reasonable and or at least could be reasonable, then I don't see any reason why everyone should be lying all the time. You know, just while I'm on this tangent, you'll hear people will propose different kinds of lies, like if a friend invites you to their birthday party and you just don't feel like going, you know, you just say you're sick. And I don't like that. I don't like that that premise. It's a friend of yours and you're just going to lie to their face. You should be able to tell your friend, look, I just don't feel like going. I really like you as a friend, but I'm just tired, or I don't know, I just don't want to socialize or something. You know, hey, let's hang out some other time. Why can't we say that? Anyway, so Sumit had been lying, and it wasn't good, but it was perhaps understandable with his marriage. It sounded as though he was forced into it by his family and did not want to marry his wife, and things weren't going well. Well, he married Jenny while they were dating, while Sumit and Jenny were dating. I think if that's, just trying to remember all the details. And then he kept it secret from Jenny, hoping that it would resolve itself, that he could divorce, or I was also speculating maybe at the time, because this is earlier in their relationship, that he might have thought, well, what's the chance that things will work out with me and Jenny? I mean, my family will never let me marry Jenny. So this is always going to be a side thing anyway. It's doomed from the start. So I guess I should move on with my life. And my parents are super, pressuring me. And at first, when I was watching the story, I had a vague understanding of arranged marriages in certain cultures, India included, but did not understand the pressure and the landscape until we saw it play out. And a lot of people would email in or comment below, people from India saying, like, actually it's changing, and there's over 1 billion people, I believe, in India, so there's a lot of different practices and cultural ideas, and things are progressing away from this. But there's still a lot of people in certain pockets that arranged marriages are perhaps one of the most defining acts that you do as a human being. Not only as parents for your kids, but as kids, you obey your parents. You step in line with what your parents want you to do, with what your culture, with what your community. Sumit was saying that there were threats from the community, from his wife's family, that if divorce happened, then they would, create false allegations against Sumit, maybe put him in jail, have the police after him. I mean, it's like the mob, It's like, better not divorce my daughter, or else, something bad could happen to you. I have friends in the police department. And you just think, oh my God, right? It's like marriage slavery or something. And of course, I've known about this for a lot of women around the world, but it seems like in some cultures, it's also something that happens to men. We thought, well, under that circumstances, is it understandable as to why he would lie to Jenny? Okay, but then more things started to happen, and this pattern, especially that last season, the way that he reacted to her, and maybe they'll show a clip of it, the way that he reacted to her, he just was like, calm down, hey, calm down. And Jenny's like, I'm calm. I'm just pointing out the ridiculousness of what you're doing, because he was telling her, yes, we're going to get married, and then behind the scenes just being like, no, we're not going to get married. And you just think, what is going on? But then they did get married. Anyway, let's continue.
जिस दिन तूने शादी कर ली, उस दिन हमारी लाश पर से गुजरना होगा तेरे को।
कोई और देख ले इससे बुड्ढी, उससे कर ले।
किसी से भी कर
कोई
सकता
100 साल की देख ले, उससे कर ले।
His parents were against the marriage from the beginning, but then I think they saw that I really genuinely do love their son, and they had a change of heart.
Did they? Because it seemed like that was what was happening, but pretty quick. I mean, because that one astrologer / family therapist, some sort of professional, was confronting the mom in a very surprising twist, saying that the mom was being really rigid, and the mom relented, which I remember thinking this as well, that the mom was following the cultural protocol, and so she's not to blame for having absorbed that cultural protocol and the premises that uphold it. But from the looks of it, it looked like the mom was even taking it further than what the average mom her age would take it. Not that there wouldn't be other Indian moms that would do it that way, but the dad seemed to be more flexible, and the mom also, she had a bite to it. She was vindictive. She seemed to be really suffering from something inside of her that she wouldn't let out, but would manifest after layers of defenses in her rigid, vindictive behavior towards both of them, particularly Jenny. We saw her speaking in her language. We heard her speaking in her language in this really hurtful way, ridiculing way, unnecessarily. I mean, Jenny's a nice, sweet person. But then, so the astrologer confronts the mom, and the mom is like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll let them get married. I mean, it was a pretty quick turn for her. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is the beginning of the healing. It's the beginning of acceptance. They're moving forward. She's letting them. And usually, from the sound of it, once people are married, especially in their religion or in their culture, then it's a done deal. You don't really criticize that because it's been sanctioned by culture or God or something. But very quickly, there was a few months later when they were interviewing the parents about the wedding, and the mom had completely returned, seemingly, to her original stance, which is that their marriage is an abomination, and Jenny is a horrible human being, and Sumit is throwing his life down the tubes, and she doesn't understand. So Jenny right now is saying that mom turned around, and I would say briefly, long enough for them to get married.
Do we have your blessings to marry?
We are not going to stop you and not going to support you.
I understand.
So I took the conversation I had with them as approval to get married. So finally, we just decided that let's get married, and
We able to.
I authorize.
They're skipping over some of the other scandals. They're actually really, of course, this is just a brief summary to catch people up if people forgot or if they have never seen this show before. But they're skipping over extreme shadiness from him. Now, I don't think he wakes up in the morning and said, well, at the time I remember thinking, like, does he actually want to marry Jenny? So, but then he did. And so I think the conclusion is that all that shadiness and all that wishy-washiness about marrying her and avoiding all that was something going on for him, some kind of defense, some kind of worry. Oh, that's right. That's all coming back to me. So he expressed, and I believe him, that he was terrified of something bad happening in his life. He has committed to things like getting married to, in an arranged marriage, and really, really bad things would happen from that. His life would go down the tubes. He seemingly was pretty depressed and demoralized. And so even though this marriage doesn't have anything to do with that, isn't like that, and in all likelihood, if he wanted to divorce her at any point, it wouldn't be a problem, especially in relation to his. So he's not trapped, but I think he felt like he might be getting trapped, and his normal defense is not to think about it, not to talk about it, not to process his feelings, not to have self-awareness, not to seek help or support, or he just goes into denial and shuts it down in his head, outwardly telling Jenny, oh yeah, everything's fine, but behind the scenes just sabotaging everything. And I think it's like his right hand doesn't know what his left hand is doing. If you're watching the show, you think he's a psychopath, because that's the way it came across. I mean, who does that? Who just lies straight up to someone's face and then 5 minutes later is completely undermining the most important thing. And for Jenny, it wasn't like undermining what they're going to have for dinner. It's undermining a 10-year emotional process for Jenny of just like going back and forth and, okay, I'm done going, and then he'd suck her back in and something, oh, I'm going home, just several cycles of this. And then to, at the last minute, just like I said, psychopath without empathy in a very callous way, lie behind her back and undermine the whole thing. And then when she has a reaction like, what, we're not getting married? And he's like, and I'm sort of exaggerating her reaction. She went, huh? And he's, calm down. Hey, calm down. And you're like, I just remember I was so triggered by that, because that's awful. Anyway, so they're not going into that. And I'm just going to take a guess and say that Sumit hasn't, even if he's been in therapy since the last season, I don't think that would be enough time to heal from whatever relational traumas and change schemas, such that he doesn't have that tendency, that defensive reaction. And I don't know if that'll happen in the season, but I don't know. I'm just trying to reorient myself to this couple.
If people want to become a sandwich, then what I can do?
yeah, but I don't want our car to get hurt.
Married life is great, but thing is, my parents don't know about it. I was thinking to tell my parents at the tell-all, but they went back on how they felt about Jerry.
Sadhna, do
Oh, they got married. The parents didn't know? Yeah, I remember. I think they got married, and obviously the parents know now because they watched the show. But yeah, I remember, right, I think the brother knew, and he was going to tell them, and I was like, do not tell the parents on the tell-all. Tell them in private. Don't put them on the spot like this. It's so rude to do to someone. And he didn't, so I thought that was good. I figured, well, he'll probably tell them later.
You feel that it is okay if Sumit and Jenny get married?
बिल्कुल भी पसंद नहीं करूंगी मैं जेनी को सुमित
Right. I forgot about this, that they're already married. And this is another small example of him being shady, of him lying straight to the parents' face. He should probably have told them, by the way, I'm getting married to Jenny next week and you're not invited. Because the thing is the parents will find out that they're married. They watch the show. They will find out that they got married. They will find out they were not invited. They will find out everything. And that's what pathological lying involves, is that the person will lie, even though logically everyone understands, including Sumit, that the lying will make it worse. Well, you're worried about, well, if I tell my parents before the wedding, well, I guess maybe it was a strategy like, well, if I tell them before the wedding, they'll sabotage it somehow. They'll pull strings and make it so that it couldn't happen. So maybe there's a justifiable reason there for the lie. I don't know. But he could have quickly told them right after the wedding and before the tell-all. Yeah, I forgot how definitive the mom was about it. It's like, why? Now, people tell me why. It's like, well, there's a big cultural emphasis on marrying within your not only your culture or race, but even within your social class. There's also a big, or upwards, there's also a big pressure on having kids. There's a big pressure on making sure if you're a boy and a son, that you marry a woman who will take care of your parents. Because I don't know about India, but in some cultures, there's a hierarchy within the family. And if you're a son, you're pretty high up, daughters are below. But if you're a wife of a son, you're like a slave to, I don't know if that's the case here. And the mom might kind of believe that. Now, of course, they have another son who has married in a more traditional way. But anyway.
के साथ शादी करनी
We are not stopping you to live together. Why you're so anxious to getting married?
Because we love each other. That's why.
Yeah, and she can't stay in the country if they're not married. I forget the details, but in order for her to stay there and I think work there, they have to get married.
After the tell-all,
I'm also reminded that in order for him to get divorced, which was a whole emotional thing, he had to pay, or the dad had to pay $30,000 or something. It's like, oh my God. So I just looked it up on the internet in terms of what's the equivalent of $30,000 in India, given salaries and cost of living and that sort of thing. And it would be as if in the United States, you had to pay $150,000 to, I think, the family or to lawyers or something. So just imagine that. In order to get divorced in the United States, that you would have to pay $150,000. Most people wouldn't even be able to afford it. And that's one of the reasons for the statistic, I believe, don't quote me on this, that in India, their divorce rate is, I think, at 1%. And to contrast that, in the United States, it's something like 45% of first marriages. When you include all marriages, like second, third, fourth marriages, then I think it goes up to 50%. But we're talking about first marriages, something like 45%. So that's a huge difference. And I'm guessing this is one of the mechanisms that keeps that rate at 1%.
temporarily moved to a new apartment, which is other side of the city.
We're worried that his parents will come to find out that we're married through someone else. So they'll come and try to take him away. They've done it before, and I know that they're going to try and do it again. Oh.
Yeah, just like essentially kidnapping. I mean, not really kidnapping, but a lot of pressure, threats, using emotional blackmail. The mom threatened to kill herself. Remember that one time? Because he was going to marry. Just imagine that. Oh my. And that, again, made me wonder if the mom is suffering from something else and it just manifests in this cultural protocol.
Finally, we did it, and so I feel less pressure.
I think only hurdle is me telling my parents that we are married.
Yeah. Oh, don't tell them, and we'll just go live our life in a different state then.
So this must be filmed directly after the tell-all, or maybe even before. Well, it must be after the tell-all, which was a long time ago, because I would assume that the parents either watched the show or someone would text them and say, we watched the show, did you know that? So this is a while back.
I'm in a very tough spot. A lot of people know that we are married. If my parents comes to know through someone else, they might never talk to me ever again, and I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, so this is one of those moments where he wants to kick the can down the road. He wants to avoid because he's scared. And I'm reminded of my speculation around his childhood. Of course, I have no idea. But given the mom's demeanor and that threat that she made, I'm guessing that's not the only time she's said such a thing, that he grew up in a situation where his mom would have extreme reactions to him misbehaving or getting in trouble or disappointing her. I don't know that, but it seems likely, right? Doesn't seem likely that she just developed this personality trait or reactivity when he was 30 years old. So when he was young, I'm just going to take a guess and say that's possible. And when you're in a situation like that, there are a number of different coping styles. And one of the coping styles is to learn how to lie, almost to, in a psychoanalytic way, dissociate from the lying itself. You're 3 years old, you're 7 years old, and you do something like you don't do a chore, or you break something, or you eat the last cookie or something, and you turn the corner and you see your mom's face, and you just know you're in trouble by the way she's looking at you, and the consequences, the felt worry of the consequences and the trauma of, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble. And then boom, you have a neurological reaction to it that kicks in automatically, that will lie. Just boom, lie. And in order to cope with that growing up, it's hard to reconcile the lying with how you see yourself or the love that you might believe that you have for your mom. So you're stuck in this bind because of the abuse that's happening to you and the knee-jerk lying that you're doing. How do you frame that at the age of 5 years old? It's hard to know how to frame that. So one way, so not only are you dealing with the abuse and you have this knee-jerk reaction of lying, but you have an added problem of how do you view the self? How do you understand yourself as a human being? Because the temptation, especially when you're young, because we tend to be very black and white thinkers, is, well, I'm lying, I must be a horrible human being. And the ego can't handle that. So it needs some way of framing it. And one of the ways it can kind of frame it or avoid the question altogether is to dissociate yourself from the behavior altogether. And it just gets put in a box, and you lie really quickly and you get out of trouble and you put it in the box and you just go on with your day. And over your lifetime, you're just stuffing this box full of every single time that you've lied, and you've literally never faced the fact that you do this. And then you're 33 years old and you just have this, stuffed box full of every time that you've lied, and you're completely unaware in the same way that a 5-year-old would be unaware. That's the way he comes across to me. So the show is actually forcing him to face things that I don't think he would. I think he would gladly stuff in a box and just move on, and his parents would find out by watching the show or having someone tell them. And the show is asking him, are you going to tell? And so I think he has to face that, and we'll see what he does.
We get married, we're happy, and still we can't be happy.
I know it's hard for Jenny to understand, but I cannot keep this from my parents because they are the only people who love me along with Jenny unconditionally. Whatever I do, it's possible that I might lose them, but I have to tell them.
Interesting that he says that his parents love him unconditionally. I don't know if the people who watch the show would necessarily agree with that. I mean, we'd have to define what unconditionally meant or what love means. I think it's possible that within their culture that this is a loving act that parents will do to their children, will take sacrifices for their own happiness to impose some weird protocol on the child because they believe it's in the best interest of the child. And, I've talked about this before in relation to this family, but it bears repeating that in my cultural pocket, an example of this would be if a 15-year-old said, that she didn't want to go to school anymore. She wanted, or to make it more extreme, say a 10-year-old decided she didn't like school anymore and she's going to drop out. And to make matters worse, she thinks she should move out of the house. And that's what she wants. She's 10, and that's what she wants to do. And the parents would say, no, you're not going to. And let's say that the parents really fight or become very rigid or take a lot of actions to keep the child in school, to help the daughter get educated, to restrain the child from, or prevent the child from leaving the house and running away, because it's obviously in the best interest of the child, mainly the running away part, because the child could literally be harmed, killed, if they run away. And quitting school is a bad move for kids at that age particularly. So even though the child is saying, this is what I want, the parents are saying, well, I don't care what you want, I know what's best for you. So we could say that in some cultures they expand that, sentiment and that principle to a lot of parental control that in my cultural pocket they would not do. So if your culture defines responsible parenting as this, then I suppose this is what you're going to do. Now, I will say, I didn't show the clip, but Sumit told Jenny that the parents are coming over tomorrow and he's going to break the news to them then. And Jenny is like, why didn't you tell me this before? I'm guessing it's because he was kicking the can down the road again.
Okay, well, I'll tell you how I feel tomorrow. Lost my appetite.
So for those of you who watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia will recognize this song transition. Apparently it's a song or maybe even a recording that is available to everyone. And I'll hear it sometimes on other shows. I think this might be the first time I've heard it in 90 Day Fiancé. But it's always jarring because in It's Always Sunny, these musical cues are in juxtaposition to a lot of really horrible behavior by, the cast members of It's Always Sunny, by the characters. So when I hear this, it always feels ironic, but of course, originally as a recording, it was probably just the way that it was, just a jaunty song. All right, well, if you like what we're doing on this channel, the best way you can support us is by becoming a patron on patreon.com. When you become a patron, you are really showing us that you appreciate what we're doing here, and I would not be able to do any of this stuff if it weren't for the patrons. And thank you for the current patrons out there. I wouldn't be able to make this video if it wasn't for you. Actually, literally, actually. And so, all right. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.